Poochie was involved. I think Suge Knight orchestrated it through his, at the time, girlfriend / baby mama.
Former Detective Greg Kading never held back in naming Poochie as Biggie's hitman. What gave it away for Kading was when Poochie confessed and revealed Biggie's last words. Those final words mentioned Suge Knight. I have all the details, so let's get into it. The confession that shook hip-hop. In the shadowy underworld of 1990s Los Angeles, where gang loyalty ran deeper than blood and violence was currency, one man carried a secret that would haunt hip-hop forever. His name was Wardell Poochie Faust, a Compton-based gang member affiliated with the mob Piru Bloods, a set closely tied to Death Row Records and its CEO, Marion Suge Knight. And according to those who knew him best, he was the kind of man who could look you in the eye while planning your death.
This one of Suge homies. Like, this is all I remember. That was his name, Poochie. I think I said Shorty that I was referring to somebody that was kind of eerie when they came around. Poochie, that's his name. I think that's the homie that was one of Suge's homies. He was killed. I think he was murdered. A couple years after, or several years after Suge was locked up. But
the testimony about Poochie's character becomes even more chilling when we hear from Danny Boy, a Death Row Records artist who had direct, uncomfortable experience with the man who would allegedly become hip-hop's most notorious assassin.
And you said it was eerie when he was around, so tell me about that, yo. Like, what was so eerie? Like, he was like,
I don't know. It was something about him, and he wasn't a tall man. He wasn't, you know what I mean? He wasn't big, nothing. But to me, he looked like, you know, that wasn't the one to, for sure.
Danny Boy's recollections paint a picture of a man who carried death with him like a cologne that everyone could smell but no one dared mention.
Have you ever spoke to him?
Yeah, and he would always talk to me. Hell yeah. But I wasn't my favorite person to talk to. No disrespect. He was one of the homies, but I was kind of nervous being around that man. He's one of the ones that I remember like being nervous, like around. I never felt super comfortable like.
But it wasn't just the aura of menace that surrounded Poochie Faust. It was the methodical way he allegedly carried out what would become one of the most shocking assassinations in music history. According to former LAPD detective Greg Kading's investigation, Knight orchestrated Biggie's murder as revenge for Tupac's death, hiring Faust as the shooter for $13,000, $25,000. The confession that would eventually emerge didn't come from Poochie himself. He was killed in a drive-by shooting in Compton on July 24, 2003, at age 43, taking his first-hand knowledge to the grave. Instead, it came from the woman who allegedly helped orchestrate the entire operation, a figure known only as Teresa Swan, Knight's girlfriend who allegedly helped plan the murder and confessed under immunity when facing her own legal troubles. But the path to this confession was anything but straightforward, and the circumstances under which it was obtained raised troubling questions about its reliability. Teresa Swan was facing fraud charges and potential loss of custody of her children when she provided her confession, creating a situation where she had every incentive to tell investigators what they wanted to hear, regardless of whether it was the truth. When radio host Mike Mitchell pressed Greg Kading about the decision to protect certain witnesses while exposing others, the exchange revealed the complex moral calculations that went into handling this explosive information. The ethical dimensions of the investigation become even murkier when we consider Kading's own admission about his status during the crucial period.
Well, first of all, you keep saying I'm in law enforcement. I wasn't at the time this all happened.
No, but you were to investigate it.
But you're saying you're in law enforcement and you did this. So these are important little distinctions. I was retired. I had no obligation to the department. I had no obligation to anything. I get to decide what I want to do.
According to the theory that emerged from these confessions and investigations, the murder of Christopher Wallace wasn't a random act of violence or even a simple gang shooting. It was a calculated act of revenge that reached into the highest levels of the music industry. The theory frames Biggie's murder as retaliation, with Diddy allegedly paying Crips gang members $1 million to kill Tupac, prompting Knight to respond by targeting Biggie. But even more shocking are the allegations that surfaced decades later about potential betrayal from within Biggie's own inner circle. In a January 2025 Peacock documentary, Diddy's ex-bodyguard Gene Deal claimed that Diddy acted suspiciously before the murder, insisting Biggie attend the Risky Vibe party despite security warnings and appearing anxious throughout the evening. These allegations take on a particularly sinister dimension when we consider that Gene Deal was supposed to be protecting both men that night, and his claims suggest a level of foreknowledge or complicity that goes to the very heart of the Bad Boy Records organization. However, Kading's investigation revealed troubling inconsistencies in witness testimony that have plagued this case from the beginning. When discussing Gene Deal's evolving statements about what he saw that night, Kading exposed some disturbing contradictions. The problem, according to Kading, is that witness accounts change dramatically over time, potentially influenced by media coverage, public speculation, and the witnesses' own evolving understanding of their role in hip-hop history. The evolution of these witness accounts reveals a troubling pattern where initial, potentially more reliable testimony gave way to narratives that seem to align more closely with public theories and media speculation. When pressed about witness motivation and credibility, the exchange between Mitchell and Kading revealed the fundamental challenge of separating truth from self-interest in such a high-stakes case. But perhaps the most damaging aspect of the alleged confession is how it reveals the calculated nature of the crime. According to the theory, this wasn't a crime of passion or a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a business transaction, a cold-blooded contract killing dressed up in the clothes of gang retaliation. When Danny Boy was asked directly whether he believed Poochie could have been involved in Biggie's murder, his response carried the weight of someone who had looked evil in the face and recognized it for what it was.
So you meeting Poochie, you believe he was the one behind Biggie death. It's believable. Just you knowing Poochie, you being around him, it sounds about right.
I just, the kind of person that he was, I guess. And that's just me kind of like, you know what I mean? I don't want to look at somebody and kind of like size him up from that. But yeah, he looked like a real, like if you're going to point it at somebody, there's a couple of dudes you'd be like, nah, he wouldn't do that. If him, shit, it's a possibility.
The institutional response to these confessions and theories has been deeply troubling. The LAPD has not pursued charges in the Biggie case, citing insufficient evidence for prosecution, while the case remains officially open but inactive due to lack of new leads. Even more disturbing is how the investigation itself became fractured along competing theories and personal rivalries. When Mitchell asked Kading about the ongoing disputes between different investigators and theorists, his response revealed a law enforcement community that seemed more interested in defending their own conclusions than in pursuing justice. Yet Kading insisted that his conclusions weren't just personal opinions, but the result of a comprehensive institutional investigation. The tragedy of these alleged confessions is that they may represent the closest we'll ever come to understanding what really happened on March 9, 1997, but they also reveal the fundamental corruption that allowed such a crime to occur in the first place. A world where human life could be bought and sold like a commodity, where loyalty was measured in dollars rather than devotion, and where the very people charged with protecting artists became complicit in their destruction. Recent developments, including the 2023 arrest of Keith D for Tupac's murder, have reignited interest in Biggie's case, with some linking the two murders through shared informants and overlapping gang connections. But even these breakthroughs have failed to produce concrete progress in the Biggie investigation, leaving us with confessions that may be true, witnesses who may be lying, and a justice system that seems incapable of delivering the closure that hip-hop desperately needs. The alleged confession of Teresa Swan and the supporting testimony about Poochie Faust's character paint a picture of a murder that was both shockingly brutal and coldly calculated. But whether these confessions represent the truth or simply another layer of deception in a case built on lies and betrayal remains one of hip-hop's most haunting mysteries. What we do know is that somewhere in the intersection of gang loyalty, music industry politics, and institutional corruption, the truth about who killed Biggie Smalls continues to hide, protected by a conspiracy of silence that has endured for more than a quarter century. Alternative theories and hidden conspiracies. While the Poochie Faust theory has dominated headlines and documentaries, the murder of Christopher Wallace has spawned a labyrinth of alternative theories that paint an even darker picture of corruption, conspiracy, and institutional cover-ups. These competing narratives suggest that the truth about who killed Biggie Smalls may be far more complex and disturbing than a simple gang retaliation, reaching into the highest levels of law enforcement, government agencies, and the music industry itself. Perhaps the most chilling alternative theory suggests that the very people sworn to protect and serve were the ones pulling the trigger. Late LAPD Detective Russell Poole theorized that off-duty LAPD officers David Mack and Rafael Perez, who moonlighted as security for Death Row Records, were involved in the murder, with Mack allegedly hiring Amir Muhammad, aka Harry Billups, as the shooter. This theory isn't based on speculation or street rumors. It's built on documented evidence of systemic corruption within the LAPD that went far beyond a few bad apples. The investigation revealed witness accounts placing Mack and Perez near the scene, 2015, a black Impala linked to Mac, and FBI documents showing extensive LAPD ties to Death Row Records. Even more disturbing, Poole claimed there was an active cover-up by LAPD leadership, including Chief Bernard Parks, whose daughter was allegedly photographed with Mac and Perez in gang attire. The implications of this theory are staggering. It suggests that Wallace wasn't just killed by criminals, but by the very institution that was supposed to investigate his murder. When Greg Kading was asked about whether he had interviewed these key figures, his response revealed the complex web of prior investigations.
Keep in mind that when I come on to the investigation, those things have already taken place, right? So these interviews had already taken place. Rafael Perez had been interviewed numerous times. Mac was interviewed numerous times. I attempted to get a hold of Mac. I didn't get a response. I did talk to Rafael Perez, had to sit down with him, and I've interviewed Amir Muhammad several times.
Filmmaker Nick Broomfield's 2021 documentary, Last Man Standing, supports this corruption theory, dismissing the Poochie narrative as a distraction designed to protect corrupt officers. Broomfield interviewed sources like former LAPD officer Xavier Hermosillo and referenced lost testimonies, concluding that while Suge Knight may have ordered the hit, it was carried out by Muhammad with LAPD complicity, not by Poochie Faust. The corruption theory gains additional credibility when we consider the suspicious death of Russell Poole himself. Poole died in 2015 during a heated meeting with LAPD officials, raising suspicions among those who believe he was getting too close to exposing the truth. The timing of his death, just as he was continuing to push for justice in the Wallace case, has led many to view it as more than just a tragic coincidence. When radio host Mike Mitchell pressed Kading about Russell Poole's reputation and the circumstances surrounding his investigation, Kading's response revealed deep institutional tensions.
Listen, I don't know Russell, and I'm trying to be as respectful as I can because I know he has kids behind that love him and want to think the best about their dad's legacy and all of that. So I need to always take that into consideration, and I try to, even when I'm being attacked by those people. But the thing is this, the facts are the facts. Russell had some real issues, and those issues probably interfered a little bit with his judgment.
But Kading's characterization of Poole's personal struggles raises its own questions about whether efforts were made to discredit investigators who were getting too close to uncomfortable truths about police involvement. When Mitchell challenged Kading on the source of these claims about Poole's personal life, the exchange became particularly revealing. Another alternative theory that has persisted over the years involves the Nation of Islam, NOI, stemming from the distinctive bow tie and suit worn by the shooter. This theory gained traction not just because of the witness descriptions, but because of documented tensions between Bad Boy Records and NOI security at various events leading up to the murder. When asked about investigating the NOI connection, Kading acknowledged that it was always a serious consideration. The NOI theory is particularly intriguing because it suggests a motive beyond simple gang retaliation or industry rivalry. Gene Deal's account of a confrontation between Diddy and NOI members at an awards show prior to the murder adds credibility to this theory, suggesting that there may have been religious or ideological motivations behind the killing that went beyond the East Coast-West Coast rivalry. However, Kading was careful to note the limitations of this theory and the responsibility that comes with making such accusations. Perhaps the most shocking alternative theory suggests that Sean Diddy Combs himself had foreknowledge of or involvement in the murder of his biggest star and close friend. This theory has gained renewed attention in recent years, particularly with the emergence of new witness testimony and documentary evidence. In a January 2025 Peacock documentary, Diddy's ex-bodyguard Gene Deal claimed that Diddy acted suspiciously before the murder, insisting Biggie attend the Risky Vibe party despite security warnings and appearing anxious throughout the evening. Even more disturbing, Deal described Diddy's stunned reaction at the hospital, suggesting either genuine shock or carefully performed grief. The Diddy conspiracy theory is particularly troubling because it suggests that Wallace was betrayed not by street enemies or corrupt cops, but by the very person who had discovered his talent, nurtured his career, and profited most from his success. Some theorists allege that Diddy orchestrated Biggie's death for insurance money or to eliminate a rival who was becoming too independent, though these claims are largely speculative and have been disputed by official investigations. However, the theory gains some credibility when viewed in the context of the broader East Coast-West Coast rivalry. According to some accounts, Diddy allegedly paid Crips gang members $1 million to kill Tupac, prompting Knight to respond by targeting Biggie in retaliation. If true, this would mean that Diddy's actions directly led to his own artist's death, a level of tragic irony that would make the betrayal even more devastating. But when examining Gene Deal's testimony about what he witnessed that night, Kading pointed out significant inconsistencies that call into question the reliability of these later accusations. The evolution of witness testimony over time raises troubling questions about whether later accusations against Diddy are based on actual evidence or influenced by years of speculation and media coverage. Perhaps the most psychologically difficult theory to accept is also the simplest, that Christopher Wallace was killed in a random act of violence unrelated to any grand conspiracy, industry rivalry, or institutional corruption. This theory suggests that one of hip-hop's greatest artists was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, a victim of the street violence that plagued Los Angeles in the 1990s. Some investigations have pointed to Southside Crips members as potential shooters, hired by unnamed parties, or suggested that the murder was completely unrelated to the Tupac shooting or the East Coast-West Coast feud. This theory is particularly disturbing because it removes any sense of meaning or purpose from Wallace's death, reducing it to a senseless act of urban violence. The random violence theory has been largely dismissed by most investigators as too vague to be useful, but it persists because it reflects a troubling reality about American society in the 1990s. The LAPD's 2012 autopsy release was aimed at generating new leads, but yielded nothing substantial, suggesting that even with renewed attention and resources, the case may be fundamentally unsolvable. When Kading was asked about his ongoing openness to new information, his response revealed both the persistence of amateur investigators and the challenge of separating credible leads from conspiracy theories. One of the most far-reaching alternative theories suggests that Wallace's murder was orchestrated by government agencies who viewed the growing influence of hip-hop culture as a threat to social stability. This theory often connects to Tupac's Black Panther family ties and suggests that both murders were part of a systematic effort to eliminate influential Black voices in popular culture. While this theory lacks concrete evidence, it reflects real concerns about government surveillance and disruption of Black cultural movements that have been documented in other contexts. The theory gains some credibility when viewed alongside the documented history of COINTELPRO and other government programs designed to infiltrate and disrupt civil rights organizations. The government conspiracy theory is particularly troubling because it suggests that Wallace's murder wasn't just a personal tragedy or even an industry crime, but part of a broader systematic effort to suppress Black artistic expression and political consciousness. If true, it would mean that his death was not just about gang rivalry or personal vendettas, but about maintaining existing power structures that viewed hip-hop as inherently threatening. Regardless of which specific theory proves to be correct, nearly all alternative explanations for Wallace's murder share one common element. They suggest that powerful institutions have actively worked to prevent the truth from emerging. Whether the cover-up involves corrupt police, music industry executives, government agencies, or some combination of all three, the persistence of the mystery suggests that solving the case would expose uncomfortable truths that certain people prefer to keep hidden. The fact that the case remains officially open but inactive more than 25 years after the murder, despite extensive investigations and media attention, suggests either massive institutional incompetence or active obstruction. The failure to achieve justice in such a high-profile case has become a symbol of broader systemic failures in American society. When asked about the ongoing divisions between different investigators and theorists, Kading's response revealed how the case has become as much about protecting institutional reputations as finding the truth. The institutional cover-up theory suggests that the various competing narratives about Wallace's murder may all contain elements of truth, but that the complete picture has been deliberately fragmented to prevent anyone from seeing the full scope of the conspiracy. In this view, the Poochie Faust theory, the LAPD corruption theory, the NOI connection, and the Diddy allegations may all be pieces of a larger puzzle that powerful interests have worked to keep scattered and incomplete. But let's recap what actually happened. The night that changed hip-hop forever. The rain had stopped, but the streets of Los Angeles still glistened under the neon lights as hip-hop royalty gathered at one of the most exclusive parties the music industry had ever seen. It was March 8, 1997, and the air was thick with anticipation, celebrity, and an undercurrent of tension that nobody could have predicted would explode into one of music's most devastating tragedies. Christopher Wallace, better known to the world as the notorious Big or Biggie Smalls, was riding high on what should have been the pinnacle of his career. The 24-year-old Brooklyn native had just finished filming the music video for Hypnotized, the lead single from his upcoming album Life After Death. Instead of heading to London as originally scheduled, Wallace and his Bad Boy Records entourage made a fateful decision that would echo through hip-hop history forever. They decided to attend the star-studded after-party at the Peterson Automotive Museum. The event was a collaboration between Vibe Magazine, Quest Records, and Tanqueray Gent, a celebration following the Soul Train Music Awards that drew over 1,000 guests into its lavish embrace. The The atmosphere was electric, with the throb of loud hip-hop music blasting from speakers, including Hypnotize every 10 minutes or so, creating a soundtrack to what felt like hip-hop's golden moment. The guest list read like a who's who of entertainment royalty: Faith Evans, Queen Latifah, Aaliyah, Chris Tucker, the Wayans Brothers, Genuine, Irv Gotti, Jewel, Jermaine Dupri, The Lox, Da Brat, Escape, Missy Elliott, Timbaland, Goody Mob, Martin Lawrence, Kenny Burns, Russell Simmons, Ricky Bell, DJ Clue, Jay Flex, Clark Kent, DJ Quick, Ed Lover, Grant Hill, and Tamia. Even members of the Bloods and Crips gangs mingled among the celebrities, creating a complex tapestry of Los Angeles street culture and mainstream entertainment. Wallace himself was a towering figure amid the crowd, sipping Dom Perignon and soaking in the adulation from fellow artists and industry insiders. The scene was almost surreal. Here was a man who had risen from the streets of Brooklyn to become one of rap's most celebrated voices, chatting casually with music moguls while Russell Simmons playfully tossed paper at him to express admiration for his new record. It was a moment of triumph, a celebration of artistic achievement that should have been remembered as one of hip-hop's greatest nights. But beneath the surface glamour, tensions were simmering. This was March 1997, just 6 months after Tupac Shakur's murder in Las Vegas had sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry that had once been playful competition between regional scenes had morphed into something darker, more dangerous, and infinitely more deadly. Wallace's presence in Los Angeles wasn't just a promotional visit, it was a statement, a bold declaration that he wouldn't be intimidated by the geographic tensions that had already claimed his former friend's life. The venue itself began to work against the celebration as it grew increasingly cramped and chaotic, with excessive smoking creating a haze that mixed with the pulsing bass lines and the heat of over 1,000 bodies pressed together. The Los Angeles Fire Department, responding to reports of overcrowding and safety violations, made the decision that would set the tragic events of the night into motion. They shut down the party around 12:30 to 12:35 a.m., forcing the massive crowd to spill out onto the streets of the Carthay Circle neighborhood. What happened next would be dissected, analyzed, and debated for decades to come. As the partygoers emerged into the cool night air under the glow of city lights, Wallace and Sean Puffy Combs paused with their entourage to pose for photos, the clinking of glasses and hum of conversations creating a soundtrack to what felt like just another night in the glamorous world of hip-hop royalty. The decision was made to continue the celebration at Steve Stout's house in the Hollywood Hills, and the group split into 3 vehicles with military-like precision. Combs took the lead SUV with bodyguards Eugene Gene Deal, Anthony Tone Jacobs, Stevie J, and driver Kenny Story. Wallace settled into the front passenger seat of the second vehicle, a green 1997 GMC Suburban, alongside driver Gregory G. Money Young, with associates Damian D. Rock Butler and Junior Mafia member Lil Cease in the back seats. A trailing Chevrolet Blazer, driven by off-duty Inglewood police officer Reggie Blaylock, carried Bad Boys Director of Security Paul Alford. They cranked up the car stereos to blast tracks from Life After Death, the bass vibrating through the vehicles as they prepared to head to the next destination. It was a moment of pure celebration, a successful artist surrounded by his team, his music filling the Los Angeles night air, his future seemingly as bright as the city lights that illuminated their convoy. Around 12:45 a.m., as the streets near the museum remained crowded with departing guests, Combs' lead SUV accelerated through a yellow light at the intersection of Wilshire Boulevard and South Fairfax Avenue. This split-second timing decision would prove to be catastrophic, as it left Wallace's Suburban isolated at the red light just 50 yards from the museum, separated from the protective lead vehicle that should have been clearing the path. In that moment of vulnerability, with Wallace's vehicle sitting stationary at the intersection, a white Toyota Land Cruiser made a U-turn and attempted to squeeze in behind Wallace's vehicle, while a dark-colored 1994 to 1996 Chevrolet Impala SS pulled up alongside the passenger side. The stage was set for an assassination that would rob hip-hop of one of its greatest voices and leave a mystery that continues to haunt the music industry more than 25 years later. The driver of the Impala, an African-American man dressed in a light blue suit and bow tie, made brief eye contact with Wallace. In that split second of recognition, or perhaps misrecognition, the trajectory of hip-hop history was about to change forever. What followed would be 6 shots that echoed through the night, 4 bullets that found their target, and 1 death that would leave an entire generation of music fans asking the same haunting question: who killed Biggie Smalls? But if the theories and confessions we've already explored are true, this wasn't a random encounter or a case of mistaken identity. This was the culmination of a calculated plan, executed by a man who had been specifically chosen for his ability to kill without remorse, hired by forces within the music industry itself to silence one of rap's most powerful voices. The man in the bow tie wasn't just a shooter. He was allegedly Poochie Faust, carrying out a contract that had been paid for with money that came from the very industry that had made Wallace famous. The intersection where Wallace's vehicle sat waiting represented more than just a traffic light. It was the crossroads where art met met violence, where the celebration of creative achievement collided with the brutal realities of street justice, and where the dreams of a young man from Brooklyn were about to be cut short by forces that he may never have seen coming. Thanks for watching. Check out other cards on the screen.